PowerPlay Chess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Going into the 12th and penultimate round of the Tata Steel Masters 2025. The top three players were Gukesh with 8 points, and then Praggnanandhaa and Abdusattorov on 7.5 points. Now in this video I'm going to look at all three games that they played today, some more briefly than others. But let's start with Praggnanandhaa against Sarana. So d4 from Prag, and well, clearly it's so tight at the top that these three players just have to go for the win. Solid start from Prag, and Sarana plays d5, and he's already played this in the tournament. And it's another Queen's Gambit exchange variation. As we saw yesterday, Prag was on the black side of this position. Bishop g5, c6. And, well, Sarana had this position earlier in the tournament, and against Erigaisi, who'd played e3. And then bishop f5, and White really must go in for this endgame. And structurally it looks like White is slightly better, but it's very hard to make anything of that position. And it's interesting to see that Prag basically avoided that by playing Queen c2 first, stopping bishop f5. Now we saw that yesterday Prag had played with bishop d6, but something a little bit different today, bishop e6. Of course bishop e7 is entirely normal as well. But bishop e6, e3 and knight d7. So this is quite an interesting line. Black basically would like to chase down this bishop here. So this, for example, bishop d3, normal move, has been played quite a lot. And knight h5. So black gets to that bishop. And that's why Prag played bishop e2, covering the h5 square. So if h6, bishop h4, g5, bishop g3, the bishop covers h5, knight h5 not possible, and the bishop is fine on g3, and it looks very odd to have played g5. You can get away with it if that bishop on g3 is exchanged off, but this is no good. But this is quite subtle. Sarana played bishop d6. And only now did Prag play bishop d3. Okay, well this is really confusing at first glance. Let me explain this. So h6 played. And Sarana actually went for g5 now. You don't have to do that. I'll look at that in a second. But he went for g5. Okay, so what's the difference? Why did Prag go for bishop d3 now? Well, the point is this, that you can see with the bishop on d6, then, well, obviously knight h5 isn't possible, the bishop hangs. So after the exchange, well, White has achieved something. So it's quite interesting that Prag is prepared to waste a whole tempo. Basically, he was just waiting to see where this bishop committed. So this was the game continuation. And I should mention that g5 certainly isn't necessary in this position. You could just castle. This has been seen before, rook c8. And then castles. And yeah, b5 and so on. And you know, often you can break with c5 to get at the queen. But g5 played. I hope that wasn't too confusing. And I mean, this is highly committal, playing the pawn to g5. The rook stands well on h1, so castling kingside isn't possible. If the king sort of shuffles to g7, then f4 starts to break things open, followed by knight f3. f5 is also threatened. So Sarana played queen e7. Looks like he wants to go queenside. So knight f3 threatens to take. There's a pin. So Okay, looks like black has to take action. Castle's queenside looks reasonable, but even so, white has a strong attack. You could even sack a pawn with b4 and go for b5 very quickly. But Serrano's next move, I have to say, looks to me very odd indeed. g4. The knight hops to h4. Now, it's always said knights on the rim are grim. Springen am Rand bringt Kummer und Schand and all that stuff. But this knight is actually very well placed because it always has the opportunity to hop into that weakened square on f5. And I just don't get this move g4 because it basically shuts down any counterplay on the king side, at least in this position. Now, I still think white has a tremendous attack, but if white were to castle king side, then there might be the chance to chuck the h-pawn down the board. But in this position, this is dreadful. Because basically, white's king is completely safe on the king side. And the king has a problem. If he goes king side, there's always going to be the chance to break things open with e4 or, maybe f3 or f4. Maybe we play this one first. And you can decide which one you want to go for. I mean, with f5 available for the knight, that looks a fantastic position. Great attack. So Serrano castle queenside. Well, again, the king just doesn't have a safe spot. And with this pawn going forward, this is an absolute gift for white. It's just really hard to defend. Pragg went for knight a4. You could also take on c4. You can throw in a6 as well. None of it looks very nice for black at all. And again, a6 is possible. Knight c5 played. a6. So this does at least allow black a little bit of security. These are horrible weaknesses here. But you still have to open a file. But black's big problem is that there is absolutely no counterplay. So now you can see, because of the queen on b3, there's a threat to take here. And that's why Serrano played knight b5. But this was an absolute disaster. Black should play king a8. And there's no immediate breakthrough, actually. The queen can go down here, but knight d7 kind of chops off pieces. Maybe the knight has to come back again. It's very pleasant for white, but nothing immediate. But knight b5 is disastrous. Knight takes a6 check. Rook c6. Now, white has two pawns, but also, this is under fire. 2 pawns for the piece, I should say. The rook is free to maraud, and this knight can also hop in. There really is no defense for black. The game went rook d7. And to add to black's troubles, knight f5 happened, hitting the queen. Taking on b5, a6, rook a7, queen b5. And now there was a spectacular finish. Well, hardly surprising with all these pieces in the attack. And I'm including that rook on a1. Bishop d7 and queen b7 was the final move. Not at all difficult, but great fun to play. Rook takes b7 and rook a8 is mate. That didn't happen. There was a resignation after queen b7, but that's what would have happened. Wow, what an absolute massacre. Pragg was asked after the game, was this your favourite game of the tournament? And he said, very coolly, yes, so far. Wow. He's already thinking about the last round. Okay, so that catapulted Praggnanandhaa up the standings. What about the other two rivals? First of all, let's see how Abdusattorov got on. Now, he was playing black against Arjun Erigaisi. This was very strange. So this position, I would say it's roughly level. So Erigaisi with white, he's got two bishops, but this one is pretty well blocked in. I mean, black is very stable with that bishop on c6. But Abdusattorov blundered here. He played queen g5, which looks like a very normal move. But what should white play now? Okay, I'll give you a chance to have a little think. I'll have a drink. White to play, what would you do next? Cheers. G4 is a winning move. Out of the blue. Basically, white threatens to push the queen away, and then the knight can be taken. And the problem is, if the knight goes back, h4 traps the queen because g6 is covered. After g4, there's no good defense. Abdusattorov played f5, but this simply gives away a pawn, and, well, white completely dominates here. And Erigaisi won. An absolute shocker. Feel sorry for Abdusattorov, who's been playing a fantastic tournament. Okay, so what about the tournament's leader? Gukesh. How did he get on? Well, he had black against Jordan van Foreest. Okay, let's go to move 38. Really sharp position. Gukesh is the exchange up. But what a fantastic knight that Van Foreest has on e5. And, you know, this is a very secure central position. Rook very active as well. Gukesh has just put the rook back on e7. Queen a6 played. And this is a blunder. Queen a3 should be played, and it's just a very double-edged position. But Queen a6 is a mistake. And this is a great move. Move 39, rook takes knight. Now, not d-pawn takes because the queen comes down. So f takes, but then f4 opens the position. So this will lead to disaster. The queen breaks through. So rook h3 necessary. F takes e3 check. King e2. And here is where Gukesh missed his chance. The best move is to exchange rooks and take here. Now, this is really complicated. Queen endgames are so difficult, but this is the best chance. Basically, white can give a lot of checks. The king can run away. Queen takes g7. The king finds relative security on the queen side, and this should be winning for black. It's still not simple, but it should be winning. Of course, there are alternatives along the way, but that is the best that Gukesh has, and it should be winning. Instead, he played rook b1, and actually, the tables turned. Rook b2 check, king f3, and actually, black's king is in trouble now. The king finds a pretty safe spot on e4. Now this rook comes back to defend, but actually this should be over. The winning move here is queen g6, supported by the rook. Queen h7 mate threatened. And if there's a check, well, the king can just step back and take this. If queen a8, d5, e2, black's only chance. and then a check. And rook e3, stopping the pawn queening, or at least covering the queening square. And this should be winning for white because the king is safe in the middle of the board behind those pawns. Also not simple. Instead, rook takes pawn was played. A check. That was taken. And Van Foreest had nothing better than to give a draw by perpetual. There we go. I mean, such a tricky game. Gukesh really went for it. Both players went for it. I mean, it's an absolutely brilliant game. So, let's have a look at the standings going into the final round. Praggnanandhaa and Gukesh share the lead on 8.5 points. Abdusattorov, 7.5. What about the last round pairings? Well, Gukesh has white against Erigaisi, who's having a really poor tournament. He's on 4.5. Picked up his first win with that win over Abdusattorov today. So Gukesh white against Erigaisi, and Praggnanandhaa has black against Kaymer. Well, I mean, just going on form in the tournament, it's not an easy one to call. Kaymer also not playing very well. He has 5 points, but playing with black, then that's a tough proposition to win. But who knows? If he gets the right kind of position, well, he'll be fully motivated. So Gukesh has white against Erigaisi. Well, if Erigaisi plays at his best, that won't be easy anyway. It's going to be a fascinating last round. Who knows? Both might overpress and Abdusattorov might still have a chance. Anyway, we shall see. I shall report back tomorrow. It's great stuff.